But I want to get the yeah, I put a proposal for the next. One moment, please.
Hold, please.
Catch up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want a candy? Pretend like you're talking, I'll take a candy.
You can take a.
Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing? Very well. Steve Brown. Steve Brown. Nice to meet you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're wearing one similar to that one. Yeah, plain old Harris. Okay. Yeah, no, it's beautiful. I'm from New Mexico, so I can tell because of your book. That's right. Yeah, so I live down in the desert, and it's awesome. It's nice to meet you, Chris. I almost went to New Mexico.
I'll go. So, yeah. Of course, thank you.
That corner, that's cool. That family had a place up across. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. You ever been to I've driven through it, but we didn't stop in the park. I love it. Very interesting. That and Zion. Oh, yeah. You all good? Okay, great. Thank you.
Whenever, and you're unmuted, so whenever you're ready to start.
Okay, are we at start time? One more minute or so?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Of course. Okay. Which might close the story. Yeah. All right. We should just get started on time. We have
45 minutes or so. We're just talking about New Mexico, so I've got a little bit of New Mexico in my presentation. So
good.
Looking forward to sharing a little bit about my home with you all.
I'm reading about the history of the West. I was amazed at the age of settlement.
Yes.
At the West Coast on the point.
I know.
East Coast.
Yeah. Yeah, New Mexico State Capitol Building is the oldest state capitol building in the United States.
Yeah. That's just amazing. I mind boggling.
Yeah.
Bench.
Oh, sir, you can't leave. I'm sorry.
Doors are closed.
All right. I think we have people online too. Can you all hear us online? If you're able to signal to me that you can hear me? No. Okay, I see a thumbs up. That's good. Perfect. All right. Let's go ahead and get started here. My name is Chris Perkins. I'm going to be talking about operationalizing data analytics methodology today. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about what brings you to this session, but maybe we'll wait till after. I delivered this presentation or something similar to this back in early September at the New Mexico Tech Summit, Mexico Technology Summit. And I popped this picture up there and I asked the audience, what does this mean? What is this, right? And they'll have a different answer than you all will, because this is obviously from New Mexico, but just a quick audience engagement feedback here. What do you see when you see this picture?
Not Socorro.
It's not Socorro, that's correct.
Energy.
Energy, I like it. I like that answer. Anybody else?
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure, I like it.
Connectivity.
Connectivity, that's warm. Sorry.
Flow. Interchange.
Interchange. I love that, yes. Intersection, right? So it's an intersection, but really this is I-25 and I-40 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We call it the Big I. But it is an intersection, an interchange, right? It's connectivity and infrastructure as well. And so one of the things that I'd like to talk about here are the intersections of multiple things, technology and how users interact with that technology, data and the technology, data and humans. How do we talk about these things in a meaningful and positive way, looking forward into the future. So as I mentioned, I'm Chris Perkins, I'm a staff solutions architect, and I got the team here with me. So we got Scott, Landon, and Shauna, who are all local. Well, Shauna's actually from Florida, but the two gentlemen here are local. So we'd love to meet you and talk to you afterwards. And also my contact information is here, so please do connect with me on LinkedIn. So why are we here? We are here to talk about ODAM. This is one of my projects that is a labor of love. It is a passion project of mine, and I'll tell you why there's significant relevance to you all here at Georgia Tech as we go through these slides. ODAM stands for Operationalizing Data Analytics Methodology. And I started working on this many years ago, 6.5 years ago to be a little precise. But really, I've taken my entire 18-year career into consideration when developing this framework. And again, we have an opportunity to talk about what Georgia Tech specifically is doing with this methodology. So as we go through the presentation, we will talk about what it is. We'll do a little bit of stage setting or set the table, if you will, and then we'll talk about how this actually applies to Georgia Tech. So as I mentioned, I want to set the stage, set the table here. There are a few things that I want to call out, right? Why do we even care about this? Digital resilience is a thing that, a buzzword kind of thing that we've lately been talking about in that way. But it's really about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? It's the CIA triad that digital resilience is actually alluding to. So we at Splunk came up with this motto, if you will, previously, and we talk about this all the time, building proactive data strategies in an unpredictable world. That doesn't really resonate with me. What I want to say is something more like this: operationalize data-informed decision-making using data analytics in a hostile and dynamic environment, right? How do we do that under stress, under duress? And that's what I want to talk about here in this session. One of the ways that I like to talk about these things or this topic is to just kind of level set on this concept here called data literacy. This is important for all of us to kind of just bring into our own lives, if you will. And I want to talk about data literacy, but specifically through the lens of data stories and storytelling. So through this conversation, or through this, and please do interrupt me if you have any questions or comments. So through this conversation, we'll talk about data literacy and we'll talk about storytelling. But just to real quickly define it, it is to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data through storytelling, context, and applicability, right? So I'll show you how we can all find a common language or some kind of common theme, if you will, so that way we can exchange stories and exchange recipes, exchange best practices with a common language, right? It's going to be a hugely important skill to be able to process and extract value, to visualize and to communicate these concepts with each other and with other institutions, with our counterparts at the state, things like that. So in terms of data story, I believe that it's here. It's what we do to drive change. It's what we do to help people make informed decisions and create that value, right? Or create that change. How do we inspire people enough to where something does change or something does happen in a different way than just status quo? So it's critically important to exchange stories, to practice storytelling, to put that narrative together with the data, with your visualizations, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that here by quoting or bringing in Brent Dykes in his book called Effective Data Storytelling, where he talks about the ability to use your narrative and your data to explain, to use visuals and data to enlighten, and to bring your narrative and your visuals together to engage, right? So these things together will help our audience understand more about what we're saying and what we're doing, right? So I really recommend this book to understand a little bit more about the data storytelling piece. I like this slide because, again, a question for you all. Who's correct here? Who's correct?
No one.
No one is. Or both are, right?
No. No one is.
So I love this quote juxtaposed to this slide or this picture here because it really talks about the power of stories, right? The first one to tell a story, the one to tell a more emotional story, the one to tell a more specific story perhaps, is the story that will stick. And that could actually be damaging or harmful to people at large, right? And so we want to make sure that our stories are accurate and data backed and have the audience in mind and better for the world in mind, right? And so I want to be careful about what I say, but I also encourage everybody else to think about these things as we roll out the rest of this presentation. So when you combine the right data with the right narrative and these visuals, which Splunk provides the visualization for, you have a data story that can drive change, right? Because we can explain, engage, enlighten, and drive people to take action, to do something a little bit different, to increase their security posture, to reduce the mean time between failures, different things like that as it relates to IT. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but I spent a lot of time making this. I've used an online subway map generator, if you've ever heard of that, because I love intersections so much. I'm like, well, what if you take data or data strategy and put that on top of a subway map, right? This artificial subway map is showing the connectivity between a bunch of different things, right? The business, data catalog, analytics piece, right? Your security operations center. So you can see this, and we'll provide the slides to you afterwards. But this is really just to get you to see something a little bit different. How do these concepts connect to each other? But if we're in an organization and we have questions on one thing, like communication or data literacy, where we are here, what connects to that, and how do we get from this point to a different point? Right? And so I just like to play around with this map because I like maps, 1 and 2. It kind of shows the intersectionality of all these different concepts and topics. Right? So I love storytelling through pictures and through writing. So one of the ways that I like to share stories with the public are through my Medium articles that I just published here this year. I published other ones in previous years, but these 6 here all talk about ODAM and all talk about different ways of looking at things like the future of data in state and local government and education, right? When it comes to labeling data at scale and AI types of things. What does it mean to have the least privilege model or something called zero trust, right? We've all heard of that buzzword before. But I do want to dive in, right, in the interest of setting the table and setting the stage. I want to dive in a little bit on this one here, mapping the cyber terrain, because I think where we are going in the future is that dynamic environment, right? So how do we map the uncharted territory in near real time? How do we map that information that our environments are creating and collect all of that and apply it to our business, right? So that is kind of my first of multiple blogs or articles that I want to write and share that have to do with cartography, right? I'm creating a character called the Invisible Cartographer because their expertise will lend well to kind of the ways that we approach things here in the future and in the future slides too. So just to break down a little bit of that cartography metaphor here, we're charting our course through 3 planes of data. So I want to make sure that we just call those out real quick here. So that way you can walk away or leave this session with these three things in mind to help you formulate your stories as you go into your professional careers or day-to-day lives, right? So the 3 layers are signal, semantics, and logic. And I'll give you examples of those here in just a minute. But basically, the signals are raw data. Semantics are transformed into meaningful insights, and then logic, right? So if you have like geo information, right? Let's talk about elevation. Let's talk about where waterways are, where buildings are, where parks are. All of that information is useful, but on a map, it's hard to make sense of it, right? So we need to aggregate that into a topology map or some kind of roadway map, right? And so the signals, I'm sorry, the semantics layer is where we start putting roadways on a map, right? We're using GPS coordinates and elevation here. Now we have roadways and bridges and intersections, right? And then the logic layer is derived from the previous layer. So this is when Google says, hey, you should take this direction or this pathway instead of the other. So route optimization, right? So I just wanted to call out these three different levels of data and show that when it comes to the Splunk platform, we can ingest all of this machine data, the unstructured data. We can bring in logs, metrics, and traces. It is very messy, right? And it's not necessarily ready for machine learning or artificial intelligence. We have to normalize it. We have to aggregate it. We have to deduplicate it. We have to clean it up and get it to where we can actually map these concepts, the elevation, map it to the different things like users or assets or the business function, things like that. And then we can start to derive the actual KPIs or the facts about the environment at that level up there. So I've provided a lot of information in the real early onset of this presentation, so I want to make sure you're all still with me, right? Because a lot of information creates a poverty of attention. And that's kind of, in my opinion, what we see in our technology landscapes, right? There's just so much information coming out of call outputs, coming out of endpoints, coming out of threat feeds, coming, you know, what do we do? How do we prioritize all that stuff, right? What do we pay attention to? And that's what I want to kind of steer our presentation to here coming up. So before we get into how Georgia Tech is leveraging ODAM, I want to do a little quick Splunk commercial. I'm paid to, no, I'm just kidding. So the Splunk commercial, I was trying to figure out, like, how do I tell a story about this slide, right? It's like one of those Super Mario tubes that Mario goes down into. But I thought it was better to say, you know, you've seen that movie where the portal in the sky opens up and everything just starts getting sucked into that, right? So think of this as that portal in the sky, and think of all of your data down here being sucked up into this thing, right? And when we suck up the advanced logs, metrics, and traces, we get to do things like manage and search and automate that data, those analytics. And then we get to do things like integrate or visualize or create those common data models, right? And then we get to detect, investigate, and respond in these use cases called security and observability, right? Or maybe it's compliance or business insights or fraud, which I really would love to talk to you all about if you're interested. So that's basically what Splunk is, but what does it do, right? Let me rephrase all of that. So Splunk is a platform. It takes in all this data, structured and unstructured data, and it normalizes it like that second layer, the semantics layer of the three layers, right? And so once we've normalized that, then we can start asking all of that data questions. And that's ultimately what Splunk does. You can ask any question of your data that you want through the lenses of security or observability or compliance with fraud. So just a visualization of what that would look like. All this messiness, all this raw data gets turned into the things that you want to know about your environment. Maybe monetarily, maybe over time, you know, peaks and valleys type of thing. What are the deviations? What are the anomalies? What are the suspicious activities that are happening in my environment? So Splunk has a path to success, if you will, the path to greater resilience. There's two kind of swim lanes here. You can see the security and the observability swim lanes. Foundational visibility just allows us to ask questions of our data, right? This is your descriptive analytics. We can look at it like a dashboard on a car. This is how much gas you have, this is how fast you're going. Just basic descriptive analytics. Tell me what's happening in my environment. And I have a question about what's happening in my environment, so I can do ad hoc searching, ad hoc reporting, right? Then you move into the prioritized actions. This is where the power of Splunk really starts to shine in terms of saving you all time, because now we can be proactive in prioritizing our actions, prioritizing what we spend our time on by getting into that second level of maturity. And then we can do proactive responses and optimize that with automation, things like that. So what is the opposite of ODAM? It's this graphic right here. So the line chart on the bottom here is what they're referring to. What's that KPI trending to 0? It measures how well we understand them all, right? Because there's so much information out there again. And every time we pop up a new tool, there are more KPIs coming to us. But how do those KPIs map to the business objectives? How do those KPIs map to the success criteria? That's the context and applicability part that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. So this brings me to where we are. Okay. So Georgia Tech, specifically Leo Howell, saw ODAM, right? Sean introduced ODAM to Leo, and Leo said, you know what? This is really cool. So I created ODAM, right? But I worked for Splunk, so it's Splunk ODAM, okay? But I created ODAM. Leo read it, and he said, I want this in my institution. I want this in my organization. I said, cool, let's do that, right? Well, let's quickly define what ODAM is, and we'll talk more about that. So ODAM is a comprehensive methodology that guides organizations on how to define, plan, execute, and measure data analytics initiatives, ensuring alignment with those strategic goals and initiatives, okay? Or objectives, rather. So by operationalizing data analytics, we can make data-driven decisions very quickly, right? So I like to talk about in cybersecurity sense, the mean time to innocence. If something is happening over here on the firewall, everybody starts to point fingers like, hey, what's going on here? What's happening? This is where we can start to drive those actionable insights to the audience, to the right audience in near real time, and start to make better decisions quicker. So ODAM is well documented on this website, odam.community. If you take this website and put it into a PDF, there's 100 pages. 100 pages of content in this website that you can go to and dive deeper into. I wrote the website, and then my colleague, Zach Christensen, put the website together for me. So this is just hosted out there on GitHub. Everything is open source. Everything is available to you in raw form or on this website if you want. I do want to point your attention to the forward. The forward is written by Leo Howell. So I wish he was here because he's giving a big giant hug and say thank you. Oh, Leo's on? Woo. All right. Good. No pressure. All right. So Leo, again, he took a leap, if you will. He believes in this because he read it up and down, left and right, and he said, this is something that I want my organization to do, to enact, right? I tend to think of this as a map. Leo knows where he is, and he knows where he wants to go. And so to me, ODAM is kind of like an ability to use a map system and provide different options for Leo to get from point A to point B using a very fast car. Maybe he wants to take his family and his dog on a trip and use an RV. Maybe he wants to take a plane. All these different options exist through ODAM, but it's that pathway that has been roughly carved out through this framework that we follow, right? And so one of the really cool things that I want to highlight that he talks about in the forward is not only the silo teams piece, but being proactive. Further down in the page, he talks about this metaphor of, I want to move away from digging up the past, like archaeology. He wants to stop digging up the past to tell the story of what happened, like archaeology. He wants to move that to meteorology, to be able to forecast risk and forecast different issues as they, or before they arise. So the TLDR, right? There are 2 pages on this website that you can download. This is the PDF of what is ODAM and what is this major component called the IT service blueprint. So now we've defined ODAM and we've introduced this concept of what is an IT service blueprint. And so I'm going to go into that rabbit hole, if you will, a little bit further about the IT service blueprint here in the next couple of slides. Before I get into the IT service blueprint, let me just show you a quick map inspired by subway maps, but this is not a subway map, this is just a a flow chart of ODAM, right? Sean loves this picture, by the way. I want to dive into the core methodology, right? So all this other stuff, some of these things existed and like the Splunk Success Framework. This is just regular project management. This is a security assessment that Splunk has. This is executive leadership or executive sponsorship like Leo. This is the part that I really created right here. So we'll dive into that and just briefly describe what this really means. So discover, investigate, prepare, apply, wait, use. These are the steps that we want to take, right? And these are the pillars, or these are the objectives that we want to hit in the discovery phase. And this is, quite frankly, this is where we are with Georgia Tech. So we're understanding what the business value questions are. Business value questions are like, show me how many endpoints in my environment that have this particular operating system and CVE vulnerability higher than 6. That's a business value question because you need inventory of the endpoints, you need inventory of the vulnerabilities and the operating systems, right? So there's some assumptions or things that are built into that. So once we identify the business value questions, then we can ask, do we have the data to answer these questions, right? How do we get that data if we don't have it? Or how do we identify that data if we haven't identified it? That's through this key part here called the IT Service Blueprint workshop. And this is what we did. When was it, Priscilla? Back in April, May? Yeah. Okay. So we had springtime. That's right. It was springtime. So we had this workshop, and I'm going to dive into that in a couple of slides. But what we're doing is we're going through this this discovery phase, and then going into the investigative phase. Like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this, right? Who is the audience of these analytics? We're developing these personas based on their business value questions to ultimately map their scenario to a dashboard. Does this dashboard have filters along the top? Does it have time windows that are preset, right? What are the nuances of that user's experience that we can develop very early on, then publish that content, then ask them for feedback, and then drive adoption through this iterative, agile approach that's just continuous. It always lives and breathes kind of thing, right? So let's dive deeper into the IT Service Blueprint. There's so many benefits to it. I won't go through all of these here, but you can kind of see some of the things I've already mentioned. It provides a common understanding of the big picture. It breaks down silos, right? You can contextualize and understand how the service operates. How are users perceiving it? Different stakeholders want different information or insights out of that universe of data. How are they accessing that information, right? So there's so many different benefits to this workshop, and that's what I think Leo found to be true, and that's why he said, yes, let's bring 30 or 35 people into the same room, and let's go through this exercise, and that's what we did in the spring. So to further talk about the IT Service Blueprint, this is kind of like an inspirational chart. This is like just a vision board, if you will, but it breaks down a couple of things. One, you put a customer on the left, or this is an end user from a day-to-day IT perspective, an end user going to some service, right? So let me clean this up a little bit. There's a resident of a state, for example, and they're going to this portal, this online portal called the Benefits Program. And what we do is we ask the customer, or we ask the organization, what's all the technology that sits in that pathway? IT operations technology, security technology, right? All those different pieces of technology just get put up on the board, and that's what we did on whiteboards in the spring. When we do this, we establish the potential, what I call the potential data universe. Right? This is when we can ask questions of that data from a IT operations perspective, or a fraud perspective, or a cybersecurity perspective, or a GRC, governance risk and compliance perspective. We have one universe of data, and now we can ask all these questions. Then you can change it or turn it into a dashboard that looks like this, right? And when we see anomalies or deviations from what's normal, like this yellow box here, it'll pop up and it'll show you. Right? But we can automatically say, if this dips below 80% for more than 5 minutes, then open a ticket automatically and triage it to the F5 team to troubleshoot and administer it. I don't even need to look at this dashboard because it has triggers in it that say, if this, then that. If these metrics go below a certain threshold for a certain time, then open a ticket. And mean time to innocence goes down because now we have an ability to say, it's this causing downstream impacts. It's not this. This is not the problem. These are not the problem. You know, mean time to innocence. Okay, so the IT service blueprint is certainly one way to approach the question: what data do I need to collect? There's another approach, and I just want to briefly talk about that. It's to use something like this, right? Devices, networks, applications, data, and users. These are all cybersecurity tools listed here. And so we just say, hey, do you have this tool? Yes or no? Is this tool something you want to onboard in terms of collecting the data, normalizing it, and doing analytics on that? So take a circle, put it around the things that you have in your environment, take an X, put it on the things that you don't have or that are politically impossible to onboard, technically impossible to onboard, what have you, right? But at least you can draw out some idea of what your data sources are. And then the things that don't have a circle or an X, those just go into a list, and those are your phase 2 types of data sources, okay? So I promised that we would talk about how ODAM is being used at Georgia Tech. So let's dive into the last piece of this presentation here and talk about how it started with an empty room. Thank you, Priscilla, for setting this up, right? And it does say spring, spring 2023, right? So we had this session. It was a day-long session with 30, like I said, 35 people in it. It was very lively. It was very interactive. We had whiteboards surrounding the room, and we just crowdsourced everybody's knowledge, everybody's what's captured in their brains, and we put it on whiteboards, right? So bonus points to anybody who can guess whose handwriting all of this is, or it's multiple people's handwriting, but bonus points if you can guess Bert's handwriting. So we translate all of these. So I have some sanitized examples here of these blueprints. We translate those whiteboard diagrams into Visio or Lucidchart diagrams, right? And then we can further create those dashboards and just make those visualizations come alive, right? Backing it by the right data. And then with our practicing storytelling, we can combine those three things together, right? The narrative, the data, and the visuals. This last one, last example here, it says research enclave, but it's really about the least privilege model, right? The zero trust concept. And so what I wanted to bring up here is just a real quick reminder that Splunk has primary capabilities in the zero trust framework, and the DoD's zero trust framework, in categories 6 and 7, or orchestration and automation, and visibility and analytics. Splunk supports all of these other domains or initiatives or components of the zero trust methodology, right? So what I like to say is that ODAM is an enabler to zero trust. And then, of course, we have ways to visualize that story as well by using a dashboard that shows our progress of how we are doing when it comes to rolling out zero trust in that type of framework or any type of project, really. But you can annotate these graphs to show that, hey, we implemented Okta here, and that kind of made a little bit more progress show up on the board. And we have some predictive analytics about what might happen in the next couple of months, you know, given our progress. So just different ways to visualize our initiatives, right? Whether this be cloud modernization or application modernization, moving it from an on-prem monolithic system to something in the cloud. We can show all those things in the dashboard. So implementation strategies for Georgia Tech. The first thing that's required is executive sponsorship. And if we don't have that, then we cannot start, right? And so with Leo's executive sponsorship, I do want to just reemphasize and say thank you. You know, we're extremely grateful for not only believing in ODAM, but for trusting us with this very important piece, right? The data strategy is very, very critical. To me, I think that, you know, I've been doing this for 18 years, so I've seen the security operations team come out of the network team, right, over the last decade or so, 15 years. Now what I think I'm seeing is a security data analytics team that comes out of SecOps. So I think there's a dedicated team that will be formed in the next 5, 6, 7 years that will specifically be for data analytics, right? Not just cybersecurity analytics, but ODAM, the framework talks about this ACE, concept of an ACE, Analytics Center of Excellence. And so that's the thing that I think is coming out of cybersecurity, because everyone wants to use this machine data for cybersecurity, but all these other departments are saying, oh, I can use that same data for these things too, right? So that anchor use case, cybersecurity data analytics, is going to grow beyond cybersecurity and grow through the rest of the organization for things like campus safety and doing welfare checks, having a lot of information at the first responders' disposal to make better judgments going into a situation, for example. We hosted the IT Service Blueprint workshop. We created a path or a plan to continue going forward, and we've confirmed data sources for one of the blueprints called SSO. And so now our next steps are to collect that data, the boxes and the components that are on that SSO blueprint, collect that data, normalize it, then based on the data that we have and those business value questions, we can create those KPIs and key performance indicators and the analytics based on the needs of the persona, right? So we have to do the persona development, and then we have to say, you as a persona, as a SecOps engineer or a SOC manager, you have these particular KPIs kind of thing. And then continuously improve and iterate. I have to emphasize that again because it's living and breathing. It's not one of those things where you just set it and forget it. It does require maintenance and care. Okay, so wrapping things up here, we're at day-to-days, right? So I thought, let's talk about how to just approach cybersecurity given our new tools, given our new environment, right? I've iterated this before, but just to let you know, again, logs, metrics, traces, events, all of these things we collect. These are the different main use cases that we can ask questions of the data to kind of help us make those decisions, right? And all the data is there on the left, all the messy stuff. But as you can see, when we establish the universe of data through that IT Service Blueprint workshop, then we can ask these questions. And then just to give one more quick example, this is the security posture dashboard that that we can light up and show, like, here are the different criticalities, here are the different threats that we're seeing by domain, stuff like that. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into cybersecurity and in terms of how Splunk Enterprise Security approaches this concept of risk. So just kind of wrapping things up here and telling a quick story about some user comes in at 8 o'clock in the morning and they notice some funkiness on their computer, and by 11:47 there's some suspicious CLI commands that are being executed on the box, right? So from a data perspective, you have all these different data sources coming in, right? So you have endpoint, firewall, IDS, IPS, whatever. You have all these different data sources. So how do you contextualize all of that? It's by creating this risk association. So that user or that endpoint has all of these activities happening on it, and we can assign risk points to it. So instead of a triage analyst or a security operations center responding to each one of these separately, we're able to create what I call a super alert, one alert that has all of this stuff in it, contextualized for that user, right? So let's say that the user is Leo, high value target kind of thing, a super user, administrator, CISO. Maybe Leo gets a multiplier of 2. So instead of 10, it's 20. Instead of 35, it's 70. Right, so you can get that risk score up very quickly if they're a high value target or it's a critical asset, right? But regardless, once you get past 100, then that threshold alert is exceeded, and now you have something to respond to because it bubbled up to the top, right? So from a Splunk perspective, we're telling the story of what happened with this user and their machine and all the behavioral things that have happened. And we're saying, this is what you need to respond to instead of each one of these things individually, right? The Security Operations Center of yesterday or the past says that we need to respond to each one of these, and that's where you get this alert fatigue concept from, right? So let's condense or distill all those alerts into a single alert, a super alert, and then respond to that. And I promised I'd get a little technical. So we have the raw materials here on the left. We have the index equals web, index equals firewall. We have these risk rules that are running. These are just continuous monitoring, continuous evaluation of risk on those users and those endpoints. And then, you know, command line happened, IDS alert happened, right? Leo plus 10, Leo plus 20, right? That ledger or that summary index is accumulating all the risk over a long period of time. And then we create these risk incident rules that say, show me all the users with a very high risk. And that's what is created in terms of alert. So that's how we become proactive, right? That's what Leo wants to do, is to anticipate and forecast, as opposed to putting out the fire once it starts or has started. And it wouldn't be a presentation if I didn't put some AI generated pictures in it. So I went to Dolly through ChatGPT and I gave it a prompt. I didn't give it this prompt. So with ChatGPT, it actually reprompts for you, if you will, but reactive. I thought that was funny. But, you know, I just wanted to put something funny here. Proactive versus reactive, or reactive. And so, you know, with that, I want to wrap things up here and to say thank you to Georgia Tech for believing in ODAM, for giving us this opportunity. And I actually brought something home that I'm hoping that Priscilla can accept this for the institution here. This is a Ristra. I'll just put it on camera here so everybody can see it. Leo, that's your Ristra. This is from New Mexico, some chili peppers.
Oh, wow.
I'd love for you to hang it somewhere on campus.
Okay, we'll put it in
Yeah, it's pretty
in
fragile.
the Biltmore building.
Okay, good.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
of course.
I'll leave it.
Shauna needs that box.
Oh, Shauna needs
Thank you for getting my help.
So to wrap things up here, I love quotes, and I love this quote here because it's something I keep in mind every day as I consult with state and local government and education across this country. It's that we hate change and love it at the same time. What we really want is for things to stay the same but get better. And I think through incremental change, through incremental iteration, we can make them better and significantly better, in my opinion, in the years to come. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And I'll close with this. I'll let you read this piece here, but I have a recommendation that you all check out this TED Talk. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. And so what I'd like to leave you with is just my opinion. Be careful with your words, own your own story, tell stories based on fact, logic, and reason. Be receptive to stories being told to you, but also be critical, be skeptical of those stories, right? Don't believe every news, clickbait thing that we hear, right, of course. And open and widen your view when you hear stories, but tell stories that empower, lift, enlighten, and motivate. So hopefully I've done that for you all today. Thank you very much. We can go through some questions. I think we have about 5 minutes left. Yes, please.
I had a question in terms of, like you talked about the story, I want to look at the decision making. And because what oftentimes happens is you notice something, a trend or something in the data, you look at, you present the story, and now here's what I would like to try, right? The decision. And you'll get some people, it's like, well, if you do that, that's going to happen. Like something negative.
Sure.
Going to happen. And it's at that point, it almost just stops stuff, like, you know, and trying to say the what ifs and being able to, I was talking with Rebecca before, and he was talking about building a hypothesis and then going through the data to prove or disprove that hypothesis for the part of the story. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts about that
Yeah,
pain point?
that's a great question. And you make me think of trajectory, right? Trajectory is critical in inertia or critical when understanding where we could go, right? And so if I have a hypothesis based on where we've been, it's not going to be a complete reversal or turnaround, right? Or something from this part when I was over here from a trajectory perspective. So I think data can help us establish our baseline and establish the trend, if you will. And then you can create your hypotheses or your predictions about where this AE comparison might be. So that would be how I would respond to that. Just think about where you've been, where you are, and where you think you can go, because they're going to be very connected together as the future kind of. Hopefully that answers some of your questions.
It's not easy.
It's not an easy one. I like it though. It's a good conversation to have. Any other questions? I don't know if there's any questions online here. Any questions from folks on the line? All right. Leo says the name sounds really good. Oh, damn. Took me a lot of time to come up with that acronym. Everybody said they hated the name. They hated the name. I don't even remember what I called it in previous iterations. All right. Well, thank you all for your time and attention today. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about what we do and how we do it. Thank you, Leo. Take care. Enjoy your Ristra.